April, 1865. The smoke of war hangs thick in the air, heavy with the weight of destiny. But in this version of history, the outcome is not the one written in textbooks. General Robert E. Lee, weary and battered, does not ride to Appomattox courthouse to surrender. Instead, his forces dig in, bolstered by a last-minute Southern resurgence, unexpected aid, perhaps, from foreign sympathizers or reinvigorated rebel states. The Union Army, exhausted from 4 years of relentless bloodshed, falters. Their lines break. Washington, D.C., is plunged into chaos. The United States fractures literally and ideologically into splintered regions with no common banner to unite them. The Confederacy, against all odds, survives. And with it, slavery, the brutal institution at the heart of the war, remains intact, enshrined in law across the southern states. Emancipation is never proclaimed. The 13th Amendment never ratified. Generations of enslaved people remain in bondage, and the dream of racial equality is pushed not decades, but perhaps centuries further into the future. And what of Abraham Lincoln? The voice of healing, of unity, of malice toward none is silenced. Maybe he's assassinated earlier. Maybe he flees into exile. Maybe he fades into obscurity, his legacy buried beneath the weight of defeat. This isn't just an alternate ending to a war, it's the unraveling of the American identity as we know it. The idea of one nation, indivisible, is torn apart. The stars on the flag no longer represent unity, but division. So we ask the haunting question, what if America had lost the Civil War? Would there be two Americas, one built on forced labor, the other on fractured ideals? Would slavery have expanded into the Western territories? Would global conflicts, like World War II, have played out differently without a unified America to intervene? Would the world's dominant superpower never have been born? Hold on to your imagination, because we're not just going back in time. We're going sideways, into the parallel history that could have been. Into a timeline where freedom was defeated, and history took a darker path. Let's explore it together. Welcome, curious minds and time travelers of thought, to another journey through the pages of the past as you've never seen them before. You're watching Timelines Rewritten, the channel where speculation meets scholarship, and history bends into the roads not taken. Here, we don't just ask what happened, we dare to ask what could have happened. Today, we're tackling a question that has haunted historians, novelists, filmmakers, and philosophers for over a century and a half. One of the greatest inflection points in American history, what if the Union had lost the Civil War? Imagine a different 1865. One where the ink never dries on Lincoln's vision for Reconstruction. Where the word, united, in the United States, becomes little more than a memory. Where the brutal system of slavery continues not just legally, but culturally and economically, shaping every institution from politics, to education, to foreign policy. This isn't just an alternative ending to a war, it's a redirection of civilization itself. Because make no mistake, the outcome of the American Civil War didn't just affect America. It carved a path for democracy, civil rights, and global power structures across the 20th century and beyond. So what happens when we press rewind and take a left turn instead of the historical right? Over the course of this video, we'll explore the social fractures that would deepen into permanent divides, the political fallout that could realign the balance of global power, and the disturbing ways in which a Confederate victory might have shaped race relations, technology, warfare, even the outcome of world wars. This isn't fan fiction. It's not fantasy. It's a careful, considered reimagining of what might have been, based on real history, real ideologies, and real consequences. And in doing so, we might learn something surprising, not just about the past that didn't happen, but about the one that did. So get comfortable. Open your mind. Because we're about to dive headfirst into a world where the Civil War ends in Southern triumph, and nothing, absolutely nothing, is the same. Picture this, a broken continent. Two sovereign flags fluttering in defiance of one another. On one side, the United States of America, wounded but intact. Clinging to its industrial might, its growing immigrant labor force, and its belief in eventual unity. On the other side, the Confederate States of America, proud, agrarian, and steeped in a brutal economic system that continues to thrive on the backs of enslaved men, women, and children. This isn't just political separation, it's ideological warfare frozen into geography. A permanent schism, not only between North and South, but between two visions of humanity itself. In the Confederate States, plantations expand westward, swallowing up land and people alike. Slavery becomes further institutionalized, protected by law, reinforced by religion, and defended with militarized nationalism. The Southern economy booms, at least for its white elites, but it's built on a powder keg of cruelty and systemic inequality that can't hold forever. Meanwhile, the North faces its own reckoning. Without access to Southern cotton, sugar, and tobacco, its industries struggle. Entire sectors collapse or become over-reliant on trade with foreign powers like Britain or France, who now have competing interests in both Americas. The North turns inward, investing in manufacturing, banking, and railroads, but its labor force is strained and its political will fractured. Immigrants keep arriving, but tensions rise. Anti-slavery principles may stand tall, but without the cause of unity, do they evolve or dissolve? Diplomatic relations between the two Americas sour quickly. Skirmishes along the border. Tariff wars. Perhaps even another round of secession. Border states like Kentucky or Missouri caught in the middle, torn between ideologies, exploited by both sides. And beyond that, foreign opportunism. European powers, watching from across the Atlantic, might see weakness where once they feared strength. The fractured American continent becomes a chessboard. The Confederacy, hungry for recognition, might align with the British Empire. The Union, desperate for allies, might cozy up to France or Prussia. The Monroe Doctrine, which once boldly kept European colonization at bay, becomes toothless in a divided America. Would there be war again? Likely. Would there be reunification? Perhaps, but not without unimaginable bloodshed, a second or third civil war, rebellions within rebellions, or even outright collapse of both states into a balkanized nightmare of micronations. Or, worst of all, perhaps the division becomes normalized. A world where two Americas grow up side by side, glaring at each other across the borderline with barbed wire and hatred. A Cold War before the Cold War. A failure of unity that echoes for centuries. Because when a nation born in revolution splits in two, the rupture doesn't heal easily. It festers. It infects everything around it. The ripple effect of a Confederate victory doesn't stop at American shores. It sends shockwaves across the globe. In London and Paris, headlines scream the unimaginable, Confederacy victorious. The map of the New World is redrawn. Diplomats scramble. Monarchs and ministers alike see opportunity in the fracture. During the actual Civil War, both Britain and France flirted with the idea of recognizing the Confederacy, tempted by economic interests and their reliance on Southern cotton. But with the South now victorious, that hesitation evaporates. Trade agreements are signed. Embassies are built in Richmond instead of Washington. Confederate ports become hubs for European commerce. And with their new alliances, the Confederate States position themselves as a legitimate world power, one founded on slavery, but embraced nonetheless by global empires still clinging to colonial ideologies of their own. The geopolitical consequences are staggering. A divided America means no dominant superpower emerging from the Western Hemisphere. A divided America means no dominant superpower emerging from the Western Hemisphere. The United States, what remains of it, lacks the unified economy, military strength, and cultural influence that, in our timeline, would eventually shape the 20th century. Instead, Europe continues to dominate international politics, unchecked by American idealism or interventionism. Fast forward to 1914. World War I erupts. In our reality, the United States enters late, but decisively, tipping the balance toward the Allies. But in this alternate timeline, with the North and South split, possibly even choosing opposite sides, American involvement becomes fractured, delayed, or even absent. The Confederacy, wary of European entanglements, may stay neutral. Or worse, they may sympathize with imperial powers aligned with their own rigid class structures and racial ideologies. And when the next great global conflict arrives, the nightmare of World War II, the consequences become even darker. No unified American war machine. No economic juggernaut to produce tanks, ships, and aircraft at breakneck speed. No D-Day invasion storming the beaches of Normandy. No Allied liberation of Nazi-occupied Europe led by Eisenhower. Instead, Britain and the Soviet Union may be left to shoulder the burden alone, possibly at the cost of total collapse. Hitler's regime could stretch across more of the continent. The Holocaust might rage on, unchallenged for longer. The war could last years more, or end in an Axis victory. And even after the war, there's no Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe. No NATO. No American-led post-war order. The Cold War, if it happens at all, doesn't pit democracy against communism. It may pit fragmented ideologies, or descend into a worldwide scramble for power without moral clarity, or a balancing force. This alternate world is one of instability. A place where the 20th century's defining moments unfold under entirely different circumstances. Where power vacuums grow. Where authoritarian regimes spread unchecked. And where the dream of liberty, once a rallying cry from the American Revolution, echoes as a hollow memory in a world shaped by division. Because when America breaks in two, the whole world shakes with it. Let's shift the focus. Away from nations and geopolitics, for a moment, and toward the human cost. Because history isn't just made by armies or treaties. It's made by people. By voices. And in this alternate reality, some of the most powerful voices in American history might never be heard at all. In our timeline, the Union's victory in 1865 didn't instantly end injustice. But it did force a reckoning. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 14th granted citizenship. The 15th gave African American men the right to vote, on paper at least. That fragile progress set the stage for generations of activism, resistance, and reform. But in a world where the Confederacy wins, that fragile progress never even begins. Slavery doesn't end in 1865. It continues, entrenched, normalized, defended. Not just in law, but in culture, economy, and religion. Whole generations of black families born into bondage, with no promise of freedom on the horizon. The very idea of emancipation becomes a foreign dream, something whispered about across borders, or perhaps violently crushed if spoken aloud. Education. Outlawed. Voting rights. Non-existent. Family separation. A daily reality. And the North, without the leverage of reunification or military victory, can do little more than protest from afar. The moral authority of the Union is hollow when it can't liberate even those just beyond its border. So what becomes of the civil rights movement? In this timeline, there may be no Montgomery bus boycott, no March on Washington, no Civil Rights Act of 1964. The names we now associate with courage, Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, Fannie Lou Hamer, may never rise to prominence. Their platforms erased before they form. Their voices silenced before they ever echo through the halls of power. Worse still, the Confederacy, shielded by sovereignty, could label any resistance as treason. Organizers could be imprisoned. Educators banned. Churches burned. The Ku Klux Klan, instead of being a fringe terrorist group, could become an institution, sanctioned, legalized, perhaps even integrated into government. Think about that. A world where the greatest moral crusade of the 20th century isn't delayed, it's erased. Now, it's possible the Confederacy might eventually abolish slavery, under pressure from shifting economics, international diplomacy, or internal rebellion. But it wouldn't be driven by morality. And it wouldn't come with equality. Instead, a system like apartheid might take its place, enshrining white supremacy under the guise of law and order for decades longer. And the cost? Countless lives. Lost potential. Movements never born. Hope smothered under a flag that never fell. Because without the Union's victory, America doesn't just lose a war, it loses its soul. Okay, now it's your turn to rewrite the past. What do you think would have happened if the Confederacy had won the Civil War? Would we be looking at two completely different nations today? Would slavery have endured into the 20th century, or even beyond? Would America still have emerged as a superpower? Or would the fractured states have been picked apart by imperial giants like Britain, France, or even Germany? Could the North and South have ever found common ground again? Or would they have remained permanent rivals, like a Cold War set on American soil? Of course, we're not the first to imagine a world where the Confederacy lived on. Pop culture has wrestled with this idea for over a century. From the sweeping drama Gone with the Wind, which romanticized the antebellum South and subtly reinforced the myth of the lost cause, to dystopian novels like The Man in the High Castle, which explore what happens when tyranny wins, storytellers have long been fascinated by the roads not taken. These stories, whether grounded in nostalgia or drenched in alternate realities, have shaped how generations perceive the Civil War's legacy. Some offered dangerous distortions, cloaking slavery in moonlight and magnolias. Others dared to confront the horrors that might have unfolded had the Union failed. Even today, books, films, and shows continue to ask, what if the South had won? Not just as entertainment, but as a lens, a tool to examine how memory, myth, and media inform our understanding of freedom, race, and power. And that's the power of speculative history. It doesn't just entertain us, it challenges us. It holds a mirror up to our culture and forces us to reckon with how the past is remembered, retold, and sometimes rewritten. We want to hear from you. This isn't just a video, it's a conversation. Drop your thoughts, your theories, and your alternate timelines in the comments below. Let's build this world together, one twist of fate at a time. And if you're fascinated by the what ifs of history, if you love imagining how a single event could change everything, then make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell icon, so you never miss a mind-bending moment here on Timelines Rewritten. Because the past may be written, but our imagination, that's where the real stories begin. Let's flip the script for a moment. We've explored the dark possibilities, a divided nation, an enduring institution of slavery, a silenced civil rights movement. But alternate history isn't just a graveyard of lost hopes. It's also a sandbox for surprising twists, strange outcomes, and unlikely evolutions. So here's a wild thought. What if the Confederate States, desperate for legitimacy on the world stage, had abolished slavery voluntarily? Not out of moral awakening, but for cold, strategic gain, an attempt to curry favor with Britain and France, whose citizens were increasingly uncomfortable with slavery. Imagine a confederacy that rebrands itself by the 1880s, replacing plantations with industry, forging trade deals, and crafting a sleek new image as a modern Southern republic. What if, in a bold pivot, the South poured its resources into railways, manufacturing, and eventually, even technology? Now fast forward to the 20th century. The northern states, once dominant in finance and industry, are stuck in economic stagnation. Meanwhile, the South, fueled by foreign investments and a ruthless drive to compete, emerges as a tech and innovation hub. Think Austin or Atlanta, but on steroids. Silicon Savannah, if you will. The Confederate States might lead the charge in early computing, launch satellites, build megacities. They might even be the ones first to step on the moon, not in the name of a unified America, but under a different flag entirely. And politics? Maybe the ideological lines blur. The North, once the bastion of abolition, becomes more conservative over time. The South, having evolved out of necessity, adopts progressive reforms, not perfectly, but pragmatically. Sounds far-fetched? Sure. But that's the beauty of alternate history. It's not just about catastrophe. It's about possibilities. About imagining how different choices, driven by desperation, greed, fear, or hope, can reshape the future in ways we'd never expect. Every what if cracks open a window into not just what could have been, but who we are. What we value. What we fight for. And just how easily it all could have gone another way. The America we know today wasn't inevitable. It was chosen, forged through conflict, conviction, and unimaginable cost. The Civil War wasn't just a military battle. It was a battle of ideals, of freedom over bondage, unity over division, and hope over hate. And while the Union's victory preserved a nation, it also lit the long, still burning torch of civil rights, justice, and the ongoing pursuit of a more perfect union. But here's the truth, imagining the other path, the one where America lost that war, reminds us just how fragile progress really is. How easily liberty can fracture. How quickly justice can be postponed, or denied. So what's the takeaway? History isn't a dusty list of names and dates. It's alive. It's a living dialogue, a mirror we hold up to see where we've been and where we're going. It challenges us to stay vigilant, to ask hard questions, and to never take the present for granted. Because the choices we make today, about justice, unity, human rights, and truth, those are the alternate histories our children will wonder about tomorrow. Will they look back and say we rose to the occasion? Or that we let history repeat itself? The power is in our hands. So thank you for coming on this journey with us. For stepping into the unknown, for daring to reimagine the past, and for remembering that curiosity isn't just a trait, it's a civic duty. If you enjoyed this dive into the world that could have been, hit that like button, share it with your fellow history nerds, and subscribe for more alternate timelines, deeper questions, and powerful perspectives.